just like take that as a sound bite in the edit. And
Yeah.
put it after every time someone makes a blooper, it's the podcast, please.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, I'll try and mask it with my body in some way, but yeah, we'll see.
Cool, man. Okay, so we I think I told you kind of roughly how stuff goes down.
Yeah,
But
sure.
just as a little refresher, what we'll do is basically jump straight into. I'll kind of like say hello to you, introduce you very briefly, but then ask you to introduce yourself a little bit.
Sure.
And then we'll dive into kind of chatting about one or two main kind of topical news issues, which we will decide upon together now. I think To Set a Watchman's probably high up the list.
Absolutely.
And I'm really
Absolutely, yeah.
talk a little bit about everything that's been going on with Reddit.
Oh, that'd be great.
Oh, definitely, yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, you guys, you both kind of read a little bit about it.
Of course, I have.
Yeah.
I'm very, very excited to talk about that.
Mm-hmm,
Cool. Actually, you probably know a lot more than me about it. I've only been kind of looking at little snippets here and there, so maybe I should read something.
No, me too. I mean, I've seen it in a kind of. I've been keeping up to date with it, but I wasn't ever a contributor or anything like that, and I sort of not massively familiar with the subreddits and all that kind of thing. But in itself, it's an interesting story.
It is. I've probably posted on Reddit maybe like once or twice, but it's more of a place I consume. So.
Yeah. It'd be good to get everyone's opinion about it because it's screwed up, I believe, is the technical term for what seems to be going on.
It's hysterical. Like everything about it is hysterical.
It's ridiculous.
Okay, now I do pick up on a whine. It sounds like a kettle, maybe?
Yeah, there's somebody started a wash. I don't know if there's anything we can do about that.
That's alright. I think we could probably edit that out in the levels in GarageBand.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I hope so. I think it just started. Hang on, let me see if I can pause it or something. I'll be right back.
Okay.
So that's cool. So you guys are just using GarageBand to edit and putting out. And well, actually, I was going to ask what kind of put you together into doing this? Did you know each other through Twitter or?
Yeah, we knew each other through Twitter. I'd actually worked with Danny in the 405 a few years ago when I lived in London, and then I moved to New York, and there was always this unfortunate we had similar ideas about stuff, and we were looking to work on a project together, so we just decided to do a podcast, and it's been really fun so far.
It's nice. It's great, actually. I was listening to I've forgotten the girl's name from last week, the board game, or from the last.
Daniela.
She was fantastic. She was awesome.
She's really cool. Yeah, and as a massive board game geek, it was brilliant to hear her thoughts about stuff. It was great.
It was just good timing because I've sort of just gotten back into playing board games because I've acquired a friendship group here in New York that loves it.
Cool.
So that was like just perfect timing to learn about the stuff going on in the scene. So.
Yeah. No. Exactly. Yeah. It's really really good to hear from her. No, it's cool.
I was just sharing the story of our birth, Danny.
Yeah.
The Immaculate Conception. Yeah.
The Immaculate Conception.
Seems like we were born yesterday. It's still pretty early days, but yeah, we're getting there, aren't we? Got a jingle now and everything.
Oh my god.
You know you've made it if you've got a jingle. That's it. That's what you need.
Have friends in powerful places.
Is there anything in the news, Rob, that's caught your eye this week? And also, I'd just love to know a little bit about you just before we start as well, so I can ask the right questions and such.
Yeah, of course. So I work for Powell Macmillan, and our New York sister company is SMP, the St. Martin's Press. So we're kind of worldwide, and we do general fiction and non-fiction. We publish Jeffrey Archer, Bret Easton Ellis.
Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly. Like a really good kind of gamut of people. We've got the UK arm of Tor, the SF and fantasy print. So I look after that side of it. And I work in the marketing department, so I'm the head of brand and content. So I look after, the brand authors essentially, and then I kind of do some of the video work for our YouTube channel and that kind of thing. But as I was just saying to Danny, I'm kind of finishing in 2 weeks. Actually, I'm going to go traveling, so I'm kind of reaching that, slightly quieting down period of, when things are kind of all coming together, and I'm going to pass on my role to someone else. So, but I've been there for 4 years, and then I was with Simon and Schuster for 4 years before that.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I've kind of always been in the marketing side of it, and I've always done a kind of broad range of stuff, but mostly brands, SF, fantasy, horror, and then some crime.
You're gonna fit right in. I think Danny and I go on some science fiction tangent at least once per podcast.
Nice. Okay, I try not to be too flag waving about the books that we've got, although it's hard to do. I've got a couple actually I was going to talk about because I think that they're super interesting for the.
That's great. I'd actually love to hear that. Any recommendations you have as well? So.
Cool, perfect. Cool. Great.
Okay, well let's just give it a few seconds so there's a pause, and then we'll jump into it.
Sure.
Yeah.
How do you want to be introduced, Rob?
Oh God, I'd never thought of that before. I don't know, Rob Cox, and who works at Pat Macmillan or works in publishing. I'm happy really with whatever.
Are you staying at Pat Macmillan or are you leaving?
No, I'm leaving actually. So I'm. And then after that, I'm going to hopefully work in film. So, but I'm happy to be, of the publishing world, I guess. But
okay, perfect.
Cool. Yeah, well, we'll come to your plans while we chat. Cool. What is your job title at the moment?
Sorry, so it's head of brand and content.
Oh yeah, that's right, head of brand and content.
Yeah, which sounds, I think it sounds grand, but it's not at all. It's basically I still stuff books in envelopes mostly.
Well, we should definitely talk about that, what that role is and what that role's become, because sure. I've kind of been following that in the U.S., so I'm very curious to hear how these roles are becoming so hybrid across the publishing industry. But yeah, we'll talk about all that.
Oh, definitely. I just remembered you showed it before we start. Can you remember what Daniella's pay it forward question was?
Oh, God damn it.
Might have to very quickly check.
God.
I'll find out. I think it was near the end.
God, I don't remember.
No, she answered something about what would you change, right?
Yeah.
I can't remember what she asked. We should really write.
Do you happen to remember, Rob? Because it was actually a funny thing when Daniela also had listened to the previous episode and already knew the question.
I knew the question. I know. I feel so bad because I listened to it today and I completely forgot, and it's really bad. So
I listened to it again over the weekend and I still can't remember.
I can't remember at all.
Can you remember if did she say it and then we went off on a tangent, or did it come right at the end?
We are known to go on tangents.
Yeah. Hang on, I'll play it. See if I'll find it. One sec.
Sorry, Rob.
No, not at all. Never.
See, the Immaculate Conception has a little ways to go before becoming immaculate. So.
It's perfect because of its imperfections. That's no worries at all.
That's certainly how I like to think of it. So coincidentally, while Danny's working that out, I actually also work basically in brand, but just in digital. So.
Oh right, okay. So are you doing freelance with a company?
No, I actually work full time at an agency.
Oh yeah.
Digital agency. Yeah.
In New York.
Uh-huh.
Nice. And whereabouts do you live in New York?
Brooklyn.
All right. Nice.
Like I'm one of the cool kids or something, but I'm not. So.
It's funny because every time I meet someone from Shoreditch as well, they're always like, I live there, but I don't feel very Shoreditch at all. I think it's kind of an idea, isn't it? More than anything.
Exactly. I actually live in the Writer part of Brooklyn, actually. So like.
Oh yeah.
What's his name? Jonathan Franzen lives around here.
Oh no way! Nice. I bet he's got a nice place.
Who's the other guy? I bet Franzen has a wonderful place. The guy who wrote Cavalier and Clay, Michael Chabon.
Oh
and
yeah,
his wife. Yeah.
Oh, amazing.
Okay. I can't find it for the life of me, so we'll just go with one of the older questions, which was
sure.
What
was it? If you could change
one
thing.
What advice would you give your younger self?
Yeah, that'll do.
Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah, that's always a good one. Okay, cool.
Yeah, great.
Right.
Okay.
Few seconds pause, and then we'll jump in. Hi everybody, and welcome back to Uncaring Universe. This week we are joined by a dear friend of mine, Mr. Roberto Cox, aka Rob Cox, who is the head of brand and content at publishers Pan Macmillan. So Rob, What kind of stuff do you do day to day? You're working with a bunch of books across a couple of different like imprints and labels at the publisher.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely, yes. So I do. I mean, we do a kind of cross section of stuff, but the brand side of it, I work on authors such as Jeffrey Archer and David Baldacci, Ken Follett as well, and then kind of on the content side of it, I work with our digital team and create content for the YouTube channel. Also work on some of the social networks that we've got, and then I've got another side of it as well, which is the Tor UK blog and social media. So I look after that, and I kind of commission articles from SF and fancy writers and that kind of thing. I'm actually taking that on as a freelance project shortly, so awesome. Which we'll talk about more in a bit, I imagine.
No, that's really cool. And tor.com, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, is a brilliant website. I really love the blog. Tor, am I right in saying we're kind of sci-fi and a fantasy imprint, right, at Pan Macmillan?
Yeah, that's right. So we're affiliated with Tor.com. They're basically our parent company, and we're the UK side of it. So there's torbooks.co.uk, which is the one that I look after, but we share content with Tor.com quite a lot. In fact, Tor.com, interestingly, is a separate entity unto itself. So it's run as a kind of almost a separate business to the Tor publisher. Which is kind of unusual, actually. I think because Tor.com's reached a level that means it can operate in that way that other websites that are affiliated with publishers probably couldn't. Yeah. So it's kind of got that clout to it, and I know it's huge, really. I mean, the stuff that the articles they commission, all that kind of thing are amazing. They've got a huge amount of clout in the industry, definitely.
Yeah, there's podcasts, there's like we kind of rewatch old TV series. But I've got to say, from what you've just said, I'm already really seriously doubting my understanding of the publishing business. It sounds way more complicated than I ever imagined.
We're gonna dive in, Danny. It's gonna be exciting.
We are going to dive in, but before we dive in, let's have a very quick chat about some of the biggest news stories of the fortnight. So, speaking of books, what do you guys think about the Ghost Set a Watchman debacle? I don't know if it qualifies as a debacle. Controversy, maybe?
I think there's a couple of words you could use that would accurately describe it. Debacle probably being one of them, or controversy, definitely. I mean,
they're borderline, both of them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Interesting. I mean, I'm absolutely interested to hear from you guys' perspective, because within the publishing industry, and particularly from the position I'm in, I have to see it from a communications perspective and a marketing and publicity perspective. Yeah. So I've got a kind of idea about what they're doing in the company, in the publishing house, but from a consumer-facing point of view, I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I've got a personal opinion about it, but overall, I don't know. The most interesting thing to me is that it's a book that has a story in and of itself, which is incredibly rare to have in publishing.
Yeah.
And if you've got it, maximize it as much as possible without wanting to sound like a terrible comms person.
No, of course.
No, I mean, it's interesting to me because, the thing is, I fully understand the publishing industry is in a lot of trouble. This was going to be one of their leading lights. They know this is a slam dunk. It's already sold some ungodly number of copies. But what's been interesting to me is that from a marketing perspective, they've outright lied, I think. There is no clear message on, is this a sequel, but you keep hearing that it's a sequel. Is it a prequel? No one knows. But ultimately what it is the early draft of To Kill a Mockingbird that they asked her to rewrite. So I'm feeling a little bit like this is not even a thing that was meant to be published, and I'm very skeptical of it as... I guess now it's a canonical work, whatever canon is, but...
Yeah. I think it's fair to say whatever canon is, To Kill a Mockingbird is very much a very big cannonball, taking up a big chunk of that canon.
Absolutely.
And how would we, just again, for people that aren't maybe necessarily forced to study it at sixth form, like I was, how
I don't know who isn't forced to study it in high school.
No, well, true. But let's say for those that are in denial and just try not to think about Harper Lee, how would we sum up the actual situation? Because from my understanding, the biggest thing in people's minds is like, is this basically exploitative of Harper Lee? You know, was she's an elderly lady now, and I think some people feel like this might be people putting pressure on her, right, to release something she didn't want to.
Well, that's interesting, though, because she's actually come out and said explicitly she was not pressured. She wanted to do that herself. So on the face of it, we do have to trust her at her word. I think the controversy has actually evolved now.
Yeah.
It's evolved now that the book is out. And the controversy itself, again, I have a personal opinion, but it's the idea that Atticus Finch has racist ideas. And I'm saying this without having read the book. This seems to be the chatter in literary Twitter. That's what they're upset about, that Atticus Finch is suddenly a racist, which to me is, it's actually a really, really interesting idea, because I did grow up in the South. There are a lot of prominent civil rights activists, white civil rights activists who are in Congress, who are in Senate, who later turned out to have some very racist ideas. Strom Thurmond is the famous example. So to me, I find it interesting how it mirrors life, this idea that an older Atticus is actually not as purely motivated as he is in the original novel. But that said, it's like turning Superman into a villain, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Pretty much.
I'm really glad you said that, because that's exactly my feeling about it. Is that in and of itself, it's a very interesting idea. The problem is the weight of expectation that you've got behind it turns it into this story that is beyond what the actual book is in itself. And I imagine a lot of people are going to comment on it without having read it, or who will never read it. But
I'm sure people wouldn't do that.
was that the understatement? The understatement.
Outraged without having read it.
But it's so interesting. Yeah, no, this is the thing. But it's so. But I mean, the idea that in itself, if that can, prompt conversation. If people having read it, they're getting effused. They want to effuse about it. That's great, because that's just to me that that's another publishing milestone. And actually, I was talking about this to someone recently, and we were saying that actually, in the last 10 years, the biggest cultural movements have all been in publishing, or have all been books. So you've got Harry Potter, 50 Shades, Twilight, and now Game of Thrones. Absolutely. So that thing is really heartening. But I also agree that I think it demonstrates that those peaks are so high that the rest of the time the industry is at a pretty low point, I think. Absolutely, I agree that casting him or turning him into a racist is not turning him into a racist, but having him as trying to be honest about what Atticus is like in his later life is interesting. Is an interesting way to go with it. But also, I keep on thinking, imagine if Ghost Set Watchmen had come out first. Imagine that was the book that came out in 1960. I can't remember when To Kill a Mockingbird was 59, and then To Kill a Mockingbird had been the one that had been lost and found now. And I wonder about what people would have thought of it in those terms. I wonder whether
kind of glossing over things and Atticus suddenly being this like perfect figure.
Yeah, it's a more interesting story. In fact, if it was, that's probably controversial to say, but if Ghost Set Watchmen had been first and To Kill a Mockingbird was second, which I believe it was actually in how she wrote it.
So my question for you guys is, are you going to read it?
That's a really good question. Go on, Danny.
No, I'm definitely going to read it. Yeah, I mean, just out of curiosity as an intellectual exercise. It's not the kind of book that anymore I would pick up on the shelf out of pure, like entertainment value.
Yeah.
But obviously, having studied it and it being such a kind of cultural event now and all the controversy, absolutely. I want to read it so that I can back up my kind of internet outrage with some actual page quotes. So it's
it's all about the internet outrage.
It's all about the internet outrage. It's definitely going on my already about 25 strong Wunderlist to read list.
Right.
probably somewhere in the middle, maybe coming in at like 7 or 8.
Yeah. So you're not desperate, but you will get around to it.
Definitely get around to it.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I think it's, but then if people tell me to watch something or tell me to listen to something, I don't always like doing it. I don't know if you guys feel the same about that. You know, when people try and push.
Such a rebel.
No, I don't. That sounds. I promise not trying to be contrarian.
I don't want to be. I want to figure it out.
That's true. Yeah. They. But you know, I always think I'll get to it in my own time. So I think this period where people are going mad for it, I'm going to wait and then come back to it in a little while and see how I feel about it then. But
I think that's awesome. Like, I actually completely share that where books are concerned. I was blogging about books for a while. I stopped because it was just very difficult to keep up with, and I was kind of more interested in television at that time. Now I'm just all over the place, but in terms of my interests. But one of the things that was really challenging to me is that the stuff that would get promoted, the stuff that other people were excited to read, the stuff that was getting most hits were actually the more... It was almost like news items, right? The new big thing that's out now, regardless of quality. And I kind of made an effort to actually read stuff that maybe isn't brand new, but maybe a year old that people had talked about and people stopped talking about, and I wanted to kind of explore that. But it's really hard to separate, I'm finding, which is surprising. I think it's the death of criticism across all of the arts, right? It's very hard to separate hype from actual quality these days, I'm finding, with books.
It's very difficult, yeah. And as far as I can tell, although I've never sorted it out as much as I have stuff like games writing and film in the past, but you don't get the same kind of websites and blogs and like cultural discussion around kind of new books, although there are some very interesting booktubers doing their thing now, which will, Rob, hopefully you can tell us a bit more in a little bit.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
Wow, that is fascinating to me because I have never heard of booktubers, and I look forward to hearing about this. But I have to say there are actually tons and tons of sites and blogs, great book blogs, really great writers fighting the good fight. But they've become harder to find. A lot of them have given up. A lot of them have quit. A lot of them, were co-opted by places like the Huffington Post, and the reviews became less incisive. But that culture is very much still there. But I'm very excited to hear what the hell booktubers are.
Rob, tell us about booktubers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm just going to mention a point that you were discussing there, which is about people quitting book reviewing, and that's, what I would put it as is the fact that, for instance, in 1 month this year, Pan Macmillan published 72 books, new books.
72 books.
72 books. In fact, that's including reissues actually, which we
that's
don't do a huge. 72.
In a month, did you say?
In 1 month.
Bloody hell.
I know, right? It's mad. So, obviously that's the discussion that we're having in house at the moment. But that's one publisher in London, and there are 170, let's say, publishers in the UK.
Yeah.
It's people, of course, they're going to get fatigued, and I imagine we all feel this, that anything new that comes up, you think, right, okay, the level of whether I'm going to engage with this is so fine now that most of the time I'm going to be dropping as much as possible. I've got a little list on my iPhone of notes that I make of films and books and TV that I want to watch. Yeah. But periodically I just have to cut things because you just think, I'm never going to...
Yeah.
Where am I going to get to with this?
No, exactly. That's complete deluge. That's you said, what did you say, about 170 publishers in the UK?
I think so, roughly. Yeah.
So assuming that they roughly publish similar to Pan Macmillan, so say 60 books in a month, that's over 10,000 books in a month.
Yeah.
Whether they're reissues or otherwise, but I guess this is the kind of current model of publishing at the moment, where it's just like machine gun rapid fire approach, right, in the hope that one of them becomes the next Game of Thrones or 50 Shades, and
that's it.
And then they sell the film rights off the back of it, and it pays for everything else.
That actually brings up a really good question that I've been having, is that how do you, and you're actually the perfect person to ask this question, how do you guys determine, given that volume, that is incredible, I cannot believe you guys are publishing that many books, how do you determine which new authors or titles to kind of rally around and really promote?
That's a great question. I always think of it as officialized gambling. It's you put your money in where you know as many horses. At the moment, it's as many horses as you can play. That's how they feel about it. So you put your money behind and back as much as you can, which actually explains why authors are getting incredibly small advances these days, as opposed to what I know was like notoriously quite a lot of money for a debut novel or that kind of those kind of things hit the headlines, but that's so rare that's why they are in the papers. But you spread your money thin and put as many as you can, and I think in terms of backing, the brand authors are always going to have the full massive support of the publishing industry, absolutely. And then you've got different tiers moving down from that, and what I would say that anything from tier 2 or below is not going to get the support of the company, definitely not financially, and potentially not as a company entity either. I think that it's literally because there's so much stuff, we have to be brutal really in what we're going to push, what we're going to try and voice, or going to try and push into shops, particularly because we have to pay for the space in the retail environments as well. So that's another expense which obviously has to go off the bottom line of things. We have to make, if it's a debut author who's written, a sensitive literary novel, that's which are wonderful, and and absolutely that's kind of the cornerstone of writing. But
of course,
that's not one that they're going to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds getting into a shop or getting onto the shelves, because they just can't. So that'll be Amazon and maybe some Waterstone support.
And speaking of Amazon, I mean, not that I want to make myself sound really old and be the whole is technology in the web kind of killing deep serious reading and book sales? I mean, the flip side of looking at it, you could say is, or do you say, is, it sounds like you're investing in so many authors to play the odds. So it's a kind of democratization. There's a lot of people being published, but as a result, it's much harder for many of those authors to actually be doing it professionally, shall we say. It's in full time. So it's like the doors are being flung open because anybody now can put their ebook on Gumroad. I've even got one on Gumroad. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink.
By the way.
But it's free. So and Amazon and stuff like this, and with the margins and it all just being siphoned off into Jeff Bezos.
Yeah, Bezos? No, he's not plural, is he?
Well,
but
the Amazon kingpin, who looks a bit sometimes like Kingsley Amis. No, not Kingsley Amis. Ben Kingsley.
Oh, completely different people.
Yeah, totally different people.
What Ben Kingsley? Were we talking Gandhi Ben Kingsley, or were we talking
kind of Ben Kingsley?
But okay, right, yeah, I'm in.
Like he's some kind of weird e-commerce prophet. But anyway.
That's a good name for a website, by the way. I'm just putting it out there.
Maybe that'll be the name of my new book blog.
There you go. We'll have
it. But yeah, what do you think about that? I mean, there's been all this backlash, authors, bookshops kind of organizing against Amazon. Is this kind of thing, is it good for books in general, or is it bad?
It's a really good question. I think, I'm torn, but my gut instinct would say that it's good, and democratization is a really good way of looking at it, because what you've got is two options. If you want to go on your own to Amazon and publish yourself and build up your own social media base on Facebook and Twitter, you can get your fans, writing about it on their blogs and all that kind of thing. You've got full control of that. You don't have to pay anyone to do that. And you, like I say, you can see that you can reap the rewards completely. If you're going to go to a publishing house, the publishing house is essentially going to offer you a professional editor, and a professional marketer, and a professional publicist. In the same way that, Danny, we were talking about with your game, that's the kind of service that they can offer.
Yeah.
What's going to happen is, of course, you're not going to get the full rewards from anything that you sell from that. You have to obviously split your profits. That's how it goes. But I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. Actually, we had a meeting the other day, and there was I think it might have been a Couples app, not Couples, or it was a London Underground advertising campaign, and it was about people holding up signs that they'd handwritten. I don't know if you remember this, Danny. and it basically said their dreams. They'd written their dreams on it and then held up the sign. And some guy in the advert had written, "I want to be published." That was his dream. They used it, which is great, which is lovely. But we had a meeting, and then someone, our non-fiction editorial director at the time, had used that as a kind of example that that's still someone's dream. They still want to be published by a traditional house.
Yeah.
So there's still that there, I think.
Absolutely. I think that still has a real cachet. And
Yeah.
I mean, as a writer myself, and you're a writer too, so which is also something we should definitely ask you about in a bit. But
Okay.
Me three. We're all
You too.
right.
absolutely, we're all writers sitting around in coffee shops, writing our pilots. No,
That's right.
seriously,
That's
it's it's a badge of honor, and personally,
Mm.
I don't really ever plan to make my day-to-day living through writing books. I mean,
Oh, I would love to.
oh
I
yeah,
would
don't get me
love to.
Don't get me wrong, I would love to, but I've never grown up believing that was even like financially possible. It just always seemed to me like, even people like Kurt Vonnegut, they were used car salesmen for the majority of their careers. Like, to me, it is an absolute dream of mine to be properly published.
Yeah.
Because you want your work to be read and to feel validated in that way. But at the same time, I have no illusions that, first of all, it may never happen, and then also that, it's not gonna probably pay the bills.
I think that on the latter thing, you're probably right. On the former thing, I see a lot of the time we get novels in and they're finished. That's the main thing, that people have sat down and finished them, and that's the most important thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then they can always work on the writing and the story and the tone and the character. That can all be worked on. That's fine. But if you've got to finish it, that's the main thing.
Yeah.
And as soon as that's done, you're absolutely on the way to getting traditionally published. But completely forgot what I was going to say something. But I'm sure that was deeply profound then. But
so I had a question on that actually. So does that mean? Wait, I actually just lost my question as well. There's something going in the air. But do you as the head of brand have any say on what submissions are actually accepted, like kind of from a strategic perspective for Pan Macmillan?
Ooh, yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, that's So absolutely. I mean, we have an editorial meeting weekly. In fact, we have two different meetings. We have an editorial meeting, which is much more of a creative. We've got this book in. This is how we feel about it. Can we pitch this in a certain way? Can we see the market for it, which is where I'd come in, and then we talk about kind of very early cover options and that sort of thing. And actually, if the group discussion has moved to cover options, that's good. That's a really good sign. That means
if you can already imagine seeing it there on the shelf.
Exactly, seeing it as a finished thing. So that's it. And then you've got a separate meeting, which is a business meeting. That is obviously where that is, as it said, that basically where you have to, go to brass tacks and really justify in front of the managing director why you would want to purchase a book. And that's the editorial department. They have to be the champion of the book in that instance, and then we can occasionally chip in with how we, if we really support it, we'd say, well, this is the market that we can see for it, and this is how we get to that market, and this is the team that are excited about it in-house. And if it really does come down to enthusiasm most of the time in that way, unless it's like a dead cert book that you're going to buy and you know how you're going to sell it, most of the time it's enthusiasm. If enough people are kind of drummed up in-house, then you're good to go. The interesting example is The Girl on the Train, which came out recently, which I think they're going to make into a film with Emily Blunt, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that was one that came to most publishers in London. We all read it, really enjoyed it. And then from what I understand, it entered a bidding war, but it didn't go. I don't think it reached a substantial height. I think it kind of reached a modest level. But we were
more of a bidding skirmish.
Exactly. Yeah, some friendly fire here. And then that has. I mean, it's gone mad. I mean, people have absolutely gone crazy for it, and that was one of those things that they could buy on a modest amount, a reasonable amount. And I'm sure she's Paula
Hawkins, right?
Paula, that's it. Yes, you're right. Sorry, Paula Hawkins. I'm sure she's comfortable now with the money that she got, but no one would kind of expect it to be as huge as it was, and it's massive. I mean, it's still going incredibly well. It was #1 for about 8 weeks or something. It's just one of those things that came in. You see it, like it, we go for it, but we can't ever predict what it is. In fact, and another side note is that we turned down 50 Shades.
Really?
I'm going to put that out there.
You've got to claim that as like a real
badge of honor.
Exactly, yeah, like the last stand of publishing dignity.
Yeah, exactly.
We're all in there like, you know what, this could make us all rich, but
yeah.
Were you the one
can't buy respect.
Were you the one who put your foot down, Rob? Were you the one who's like, no fucking way?
It did get very Puritan about it. I was like, this is how dare they try to... No, I was... luckily, I wasn't there. I wasn't there at the time, so that's fine. Most publishers in London turned it down, actually, to be honest. So
I'm not surprised.
Because it's crap?
Exactly.
It's written, you know... I've bitched about it before, and... I don't want to go too far down like the route of bad karma and bitching, but yeah, I mean this is just it, right? I mean, there's an age-old debate running it's been running in publishing, it's been running for many years in film, and it's more recently rearing its head in gaming, which is this whole thing of like, to what extent does something being accessible necessitate it being dumbed down, being bland? And somebody once said, I can't remember, it was like a famous writer, and they basically said, it's for something to be popular, by definition, it has to be relatively uninteresting and like
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's really true though. Like I think, I mean, Girl on the Train, I've read it. It's great. It's wonderful. Like things like Gone Girl, like so innovative in style and structure. I think there has to be that balance of kind of there has to be something accessible in it, but I don't think it's necessarily dumbing it down that makes it accessible.
Yeah, and the other thing, I wasn't saying that I advocate that at all. Just that it's obviously like a perennial debate. But yeah, it's obviously.
Well, do you think that's true in gaming?
Well, there's definitely the debates happening in gaming. I mean, if you look at something like Call of Duty and FIFA and sports games, people are always saying, "Oh, these are just kind of cynical cash cows. They're yearly franchises. They're not doing anything interesting with storytelling." But it's like everybody has to have their game or their book, right? And obviously, there are some people that are sheer elitists and believe that culture should be this very kind of high, like aspirational thing, but yeah, ultimately there's something for everyone, and I think the problem only comes if people are trying to kind of manipulate that. So some people will write an accessible book. Some people, like David Foster Wallace, are going to write something that it takes you 2 months of solid reading to write, and there's like 30 pages of footnotes, and it's not for everybody. But you've got to have both, and
it's just so hard to gauge. That's the problem. There's just still not enough examples for us to use, because Ghost Set of Watchmen is going to sell. It obviously won't sell up to the level of 50 Shades or Grey, the new one, but it might get up to Paula Hawkins level. But that is, for a literary novel, obviously that's incredible, but also unprecedented. We don't have anything to say, oh well, this happens before and that fits with that.
Yeah.
There's been nothing where we've had to wait 50 years for a sequel to something.
And that's got to be part of the problem. Like you just said, there's not enough examples. I mean, especially in gaming, which I know a bit more about than publishing. Is like the problem that publishers have is obviously it's an expensive investment and it's really fucking risky. Like you can make the best game ever, and it can be a critical darling but not sell. So, and that's obviously a big factor of why people make the safe bets. And they make the sequels and the yearly franchises.
I think this is interesting, though, Danny, because this is one thing that is different about books than any other medium, is like you're not actually paid to create the content. You're paid when the content is done. So there's actually no sunken cost. And I actually wonder, like, is that going to change? Are we going to start seeing, like Patreon, kind of a patronage system where people are paid to write and they don't have to worry about volume of sales necessarily? I think I've heard a lot of chatter that might be the direction we go, because there's no other response to something like what Amazon is doing with their writers.
Yeah. That for me would be like a kind of utopian ideal. I mean, if I could pay monthly to my favorite authors, you know, and like
Yeah.
basically like up there. But then again, you know, how do you measure that? With something like a game or with a lot of Patreon things, it's something very tangible. I mean, a good book can, for the book to be the best book it can be, some people can dash it off in 2 months. Some people, it will take 5 years.
Yeah, that's very true. And it's sometimes, you know, we don't want to end up in a world of Charles Dickens novels. You know, they're paid by the word.
Exactly.
That's so interesting. Actually, I'm interested in what your opinion of that is, because we'll happily pay 15 quid up front to get a Telltale series of games over the next 6 months, and from what I understand, they're doing it with Hitman as well. If that Square Enix are doing it.
Oh yeah,
you're paying it, but they're saying it a different way. I mean, they're saying their business model is something completely different in that you're getting the full game up front, but then they'll add things on to it. That just sounds like DLC. I mean, that's a DLC season pass to me, but
pretty much. Yeah.
But I couldn't imagine, you know, that model ever working in books. I.e., I'm going to give you'll have 2 chapters this month, and then perhaps we'll wait, and you might get another 3 the following month, and you know, and so you're basically dragging out the book. Maybe it's because the time spent isn't the same, you know, with reading books to playing a video game, or you know, watching a series. Actually, I mean, I don't know. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, that's a really good point. That's a really, really good point, because how I read is, you're what you said is exactly right. I don't want to have people controlling my time. I want to be able to read on my own time, which I do. I read on airplanes. I read 3 hours a night sometimes if I can't sleep. But that said, I also read fan fiction. I read epic 40-chapter fan fiction, and there is that element. They will publish a chapter a week, and you cannot wait for that next chapter to come out.
What kind of fan fiction do you read?
Yeah.
That may be a story for another day. No, I'm kidding. So I actually used to read a lot of fan fiction, to be honest. I used to be a big Buffy Angel fan.
Oh,
so
amazing.
that was more than a decade ago. My God. So I used to read a ton of Angel fanfic. I was really into Doctor Who fanfic for a while, but the Doctor Who fandom as a whole is really weird on the internet, and that's something I just couldn't get away from, kind of the ugliness of the fandom itself. And then these days I'm really into a show called The 100, which is like a post-apocalyptic dystopian sci-fi TV show starring a bunch of actors from Neighbours for some reason.
My God.
Yeah,
like my perfect show.
It is fucking amazing show,
great.
and just the setup of the show. Not just to do an ad for the show, but I do genuinely think everyone should watch it. It's very, very dark. The whole thing about it is Earth 100 years in the future. They're all in an ark in space, and they send 100 convicts down to Earth to basically test if Earth is breathable again after whatever nuclear disaster that they haven't actually gone into yet. So you can imagine what happens with a bunch of teenage convicts set loose apart from their elders. It's very fun, very, very violent.
Awesome.
To the point I'm kind of shocked it's on American television. But yeah, it's just season 1 is a little bit youth, teen angsty, but season 2 is pure plot, and it's fantastic.
So it is basically an analogy for Australia, then.
Yeah. God, I never thought about that.
It's literally Australia, the TV series.
Yeah.
So great.
Doomed to repeat its heritage.
My friend who got me into the show is Australian. I wonder how she will take it if I tell her that.
You've got to tell her. Hey, it was me that said it, not you. I love Australia. But,
yeah, absolutely. They deserve a TV show. Yeah,
Australia, the TV show, is the best description I've ever heard.
I'm going to pick up on something that you said I think is really interesting. The Doctor Who fandom pushed you away from pursuing that. Can I ask you both a serious question, which is, do you think people are ruining the internet? Do you think the internet was this blissful place before everyone came along? Kind of ruined it by the rabid fandom. We published this. I promise wasn't a plug, but we published John Ronson, who's written a book called.
I love John Ronson.
He's great, right? I have to send you the book because you love it. It's
I love John Ronson as well.
Have you read the new one? Is fantastic. I really recommend it. So You've Been publicly shamed.
Yeah, I've read it actually. It's great.
What's it about? I've not checked it out.
Oh, Danny, it's fantastic. It's all about how there's great examples. One of them that makes me really mad, and I'll explain why in a second. It's when people kind of shame people on Twitter for saying something. So there was that famous example of the PR agent Justine Sacco. She made a bad joke that was in incredibly bad taste.
Oh yeah.
But, she had only 100 Twitter followers, and she literally made this bad joke when she got on a plane to South Africa.
Yeah.
She got off the plane, millions of tweets, death threats, and she was fired from her job. So what the book is about is he talks about a few cases of this happening, but also how there's new companies coming around whose job is literally, when something like that happens to you, like scrubbing you from the internet. That's like your Google search. That's
right,
not like
to be
the first thing
forgotten,
that comes up. Yeah.
He did a great podcast on Reply All. I don't know if you guys listened to that podcast.
No, don't listen to any other podcasts apart from ours.
No, we just do them. We just do them.
That's fair dues. But he did a podcast on that, and it was basically his kind of audio version of the book, and it's about talking to that company who wipes Justine off the record. It's Justine, isn't it?
Justine.
Yeah, Justine. That's right. Who wipes her off the records, and it's so interesting. And amazing. The book is that expansion of it, but he raised a really interesting point at the start of it, which is that the being offended is now kind of what people expect, really. I mean, when they go online, that's kind of what they're not hoping for, but what they're looking out for, with very, very closely. And he's pretty good on Twitter at defending people who he thinks are getting this kind of shaming treatment just for saying something that isn't, perhaps considered PC or even something that's pretty innocuous.
Well, we're gonna have to talk about Tim Hunt then, because this was something. Like what? Sorry. That's all right. Sorry. It's like Tim Hunt made Robbie start screaming. I love it.
That wasn't Rob. That was
sorry.
It's okay. No, tell him to say hi. More the merrier.
Yeah.
Wave, say hello. Hi. I'm sorry. I want some as well. Sorry. We've got wine. I apologise. I'm just going to. Sorry.
That's one for the outtake.
Apologise for wine, guys.
We're like live. I feel really bad about it. It's like. Thank you, David. Editing tools I'm sorry. I apologise.
Oh no, that's all right. So actually, I would love to talk to you guys about the whole Tim Hunt nonsense. There was a real tide that turned. Suddenly, people went from vilifying him to being like, oh, poor guy, he shouldn't be getting so much shame for the comments that he made. I certainly have my own opinion on this, but I'm curious what you guys took away from that whole incident that went on forever, by the way.
Crazy. And let's just, again, before we dive in, just kind of summarize the issue. So, and fill in my gaps because I'm a little bit rusty. But basically, Tim Hunt's an elderly, he's like 70 or something. He's a Nobel Prize winning was he
biologist? Yeah.
Biochemist? Yeah.
Biochemist. And he basically said, I mean, he's a bit of an old guard. I think he's a member of like some of the kind of old boys clubs. And he basically said, what was it, that there weren't very many women scientists because the trouble with them was they were distracting, right?
Yeah.
They're in the lab. He said it's like you fall in love with them or they fall in love with you, and basically they cry if you say anything bad about them.
It was the weirdest collection of sentences that's ever been uttered. It was slightly ludicrous, I've got to say.
Yeah.
But the thing that's really important here, and I think that's something that got lost as people started to defend him, was he made these comments at a talk in South Korea to two South Korean female scientists. Like his audience was South Korean female scientists, and he went as an official ambassador of I think it was University of London or UCL that he was employed by, and he made these comments to that audience, which is just, to me, it's just like, why would you do that?
Yeah. So how did people defend him in the end?
People are all. So there was a lot of incorrect facts being thrown around, first of all, and then there was a lot of high-profile people like Brian Cox being like, oh, he's old, he just represents dated attitudes. It was just a mistake. It was just a joke. And even he came out afterwards and said, oh, I was just joking. But when you look at the context. Right. You look in the context of the actual talk, it wasn't a joke.
No, it was not
delivered straight. And then he actually doubled down because the BBC interviewed him afterwards, and they're like, did you actually mean what you said? And he said, yes, I do, and I stand by everything I said.
Yeah.
And then people defended him afterwards because there was that. See, this was incredible, and I knew it was a PR piece the second I saw it. There's a piece in The Guardian talking about him and his poor wife, and it interviewed his wife, and she's like, oh, but he helps around the kitchen, and he's really very upset about losing his honorary position at the UCL.
Yeah, I'm sure he is upset. I think, my stance on this is pretty cut and dried, really, is that basically, we do live in a culture of like internet outrage and people take it too far, but we've got to stamp out freedom of speech, right? I'm all for freedom of speech, but at the same time, we as good human beings and kind of liberal, caring humans, like, you have to make an effort to shut down ridiculous attitudes. I mean, it's like, freedom of speech is his right to say that at a conference.
Yes.
And I don't want to ever take that away from him, but it's also absolutely necessary that everybody jump down his throat and basically did get outraged.
You're right, that's their freedom of speech, isn't it, to respond to it and say you're being grossly sexist and weird and quite creepy.
Really creepy. Wasn't even a funny joke.
No, exactly. So, Danny, that raises a whole other kettle of fish. But I think actually, no, that it's absolutely a fair point that what would have happened had the internet not existed is he would have said that, and so it was two South Korean ladies who were saying it to two women.
It was a conference, and he was speaking to South Korean female scientists.
Right. God. I mean, choose your audience. Oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like but if he had said that, no one, and the internet hadn't existed, no one had heard it. That guaranteed, obviously, because they were delegates at the conference, and they would have listened to him and not said anything about it, and may have been offended about it, and maybe talked amongst themselves about how offended they were, and he would have never known that was something that you can't say. That's massively inappropriate. So it's you don't want to go too far with someone who perhaps is making a joke, and then people send them death threats and all that kind of horrible stuff, which is just as creepy as making a weird comment.
Oh, exactly.
But this is something that's interesting, and this is one of the criticisms of Jon Ronson's book, which I think the criticism is a little bit harsh, but I see where they're coming from, is the idea that the examples he brings up in the book, all the male examples, they get fired, right? It's terrible, and often in cases where they shouldn't get fired, and the specific case that makes me really angry is actually that Adria Richards dongle gate nonsense. They shouldn't be fired. But then what happens to her? So, as Danny will no doubt remind me, let's tell the story first. So basically, in this case, what happened was that Adria Richards was at a tech conference. Conferences, man, they're just cesspools of this stuff, apparently.
Absolutely. You never ever go to a conference unless
So she goes. She's sitting in a conference. It's a tech conference, and there's two developers there who aren't from her company, but they're sitting a few yards in front of her, but she can hear their conversation, and basically they're making dongle jokes, childish dongle jokes, which, I'm sorry, we all work in digital. Dongle jokes happen about 10 times a day, anytime someone needs to present. Like, it's not sexual. It is that device is unfortunately called a dongle.
Yeah. I mean, it would be stupid not to make a joke out of it. It's one of the most... It's such a ridiculous object. Even the way that it works when you think about it is crazy. And to call it a dongle, it's just you gotta keep that out in the light to dongle shaming.
To dongle shaming. Oh man, I love engaging in a bit of dongle shaming.
That's the second URL tonight that we've got to register immediately. That's great.
But what happened is like she was tweeting from this conference, and she tweeted like about these guys making sexist comments, and then someone, I can't remember exactly what happens next, but I think someone then reports to the conference that sexual harassment was happening. These two guys get thrown out of the conference, and then they are fired from their jobs, right?
Yeah.
So this is all pretty bad. This is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Like I don't think any of that should have happened. But what happens next is even worse. Army of internet trolls mobilize, harass Adria Richards to like death threats, crazy messages, harassing her employer. So when they started harassing her employer, they fired her. Which is insane, right? And then she's been continuing to get death threats, doxing, all that stuff. So the point I'm making in a very long-winded way is like, the male examples, they get fired. And yes, that's bad. These guys have families. This is by no means a good thing to happen. And in this case, it should never have happened. Yeah. But in every female case, it seems to go far beyond that. Like with Gamergate, it goes the doxing, the shaming, the death threats, the actual stalking at people's homes. It's just a... So to answer your question, Robbie, I cannot understand if people on the internet are good or bad.
in summary, we don't know. But it's like, you think the companies that bend down, you know, when they fire employees and stuff, I kind of think, but that's just people shouting on Twitter. That's just people shouting on Twitter.
Exactly.
They could be stood outside your building shouting. It doesn't mean anything. That's not going to. I've never seen, unless it's something massively heinous, and they say like, you know, Nestle have been giving tainted milk to children in Africa, then you would think, okay, well, I'm going to have a second thought about whether I buy Nestle products anymore, because they're actively encouraging death. But, you know, up to that point, I'd never seen something on Twitter and think, oh, well, that person works for that company. Oh, I should probably, you know, I just thought, what if they, unless it's, like I say, like unless it's incredibly heinous, I wouldn't. I don't understand why the company doesn't just say. In fact, actually, funny enough, I probably shouldn't talk about this, but we had this with Tor recently with Irene Gallo, who works for the Tor.
Ooh, sounds good. Go on.
You guys know about the rabid puppies? Have you heard about them?
No.
Okay, so they're a group of. So I have to get this like firm in my head. They're a group of, I believe, mostly American, but I think British and maybe Irish. Sci-fi and fantasy writers who have right-wing leanings, or libertarian leanings, I should say, rather than right-wing. But they banded together. I'm gonna sound so terribly like uneducated about it, but they banded together, or it was claimed they banded together to block vote for the recipient of the Arthur C. Clarke Awards. Right. And I think they, or a couple of them had been nominated to the Arthur C. Clarke Award shortlist, and there was a lot of backlash about it because of their political views.
Yeah. Oh, you're talking about the rabid puppies.
Rabid puppies. Yeah. Sorry. What did I? Sorry. Yeah.
Oh, sad puppies. Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Right. That's right. Sorry. Yes, that's right.
There too, right?
There's rabid puppies who are I believe, the more vocal arm of the sad puppies. Is that right? I think it's very. It's a very strange and quite convoluted ideology, I believe. But
it's a whole taxonomy of emotional puppies.
Yeah, there's a whole gamut of puppy feeling, puppy emotion. But they basically, so Irene Gallo, who worked for Tor in the US, posted on her private Facebook page a month prior to everything blowing up that she thought that she did say that they were neo-Nazis, which I think is something you should probably stay away from, calling anyone something like that.
Yeah,
but
that's a big claim.
It's a massive claim, and the connotations of it are like, you have to really know what you're saying.
One second, guys, I have someone at the door, but you guys keep talking.
Sure, no worries. So she did that, and then a month passed, and then one of the sick puppies, rabid puppies, sorry, one of the rabid puppies called her out on it and found the Facebook page, and then basically Tor US and Tor UK have been bombarded with emails and correspondence from the rabid puppies and the sad puppies about. It sounds really weird and like melancholy to say sad puppies about them. They've been bombarded by emails, basically saying, "Get rid of Irene. You should sack her. This is horrible. I'm not a neo-Nazi," all this kind of stuff, and it was a really difficult situation. And I think Tor US struggled about where their position should be in terms of what they, want to say, how they want to defend her or not. Yeah. So it was, it was just, the situation was like, it was more complicated than it should have been. But it was an example of a group kind of coming together to do something, I think, really destructive.
Yeah,
but a company not. I think that if an individual's employed by a company, the company's interest is to support them, really, unless it's something that is completely against the idea.
Exactly, I totally agree with you. I think companies really need to be stronger and more defiant about it. They everybody knows that companies made up a group of people, and you work in marketing. I've worked in marketing. You showed work in marketing. We, without going too deep into it, we all know what the corporate world is like and how kind of full of bullshit it can be sometimes. But you just want some of these companies to be like, listen, we don't necessarily agree with them, but they're an employee, and whatever. Like, they're entitled. First of all, they're entitled to their own views, and they're not representative of the company. And second of all, like, if you disagree with someone, it's your kind of moral imperative to teach them, to prove them wrong. You can't just solve all this thing with fire.
No,
just burn it,
burn everything. Exactly.
Burn everything.
Burn everything. It doesn't help anyone. I think. Yeah, you're spot on.
Yeah, there's a really cool quote I want to read out just before we move on to the next topic, which I found on my favorite ever blog, Brain Pickings, which is run by.
I love Brain Pickings.
Yeah, Maria Popova, fantastic. Anyway, so on her Tumblr, she has little pull quotes, and it's from So the quote is by Anna Holmes, who is the founder of Jezebel. And not that I would ever recommend listening to it like any other podcast, but this was taken from the long form podcast, which
no
is
other
really
podcast exists.
I love the party line, and I'm 100% behind it.
And so Jezebel being a very kind of good feminist home for a lot of internet outrage. But this is the quote by Anna Holmes. So Jezebel contributed to what I now call outrage culture, but outrage culture has no sense of humor, and we had a hell of a sense of humor. That's where it splits off. And then she went on to say, and this is what I love about the quote, the fact that people who are incredibly intelligent and have interesting things to say aren't given the room to work out their arguments or thoughts because someone will take offense is depressing to me.
Spot on.
Yeah, I think that says it all. Outrage culture has no sense of humor.
Absolutely.
So moving briefly on, I felt like we're kind of obliged to talk a little bit about our favourite books, especially coming back to what we were saying earlier about with books. I guess it's the same with films and a lot of things, but there's so much new coming out. It's important, I think, to pick your classics, pick your favourites, and kind of go back to them and do those deep readings. So whether they're the books that you think are the best or they're just the ones you don't think they're the best books ever, but you can't keep from going back to them, just that kind of comfort book. What are 5 or so?
Danny, I actually really struggled with this exercise. I had a thought. Tell me what you guys think, that we could actually do our top 5 sci-fi books, just to narrow it down a bit.
That's good. We can definitely do that.
That's good. I've got like a top 5 like geeky list. Is that all right? It's a bit more sci. Is that okay? Perfect. Kind of crosses over. Great.
Yeah, geeky. Yeah. Let's
I love a geek list. Yeah.
Sci-fi and fantasy. Yeah, we'll keep it on topic. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, they kind of, it crosses over a sort of. But anyway, we can discuss what the list is for sure.
Rob, you first.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so, well, in no particular order, I've got a few book recommendations that these are basically kind of things that I read in the last few years that I absolutely loved, and I find it quite hard to find stuff that I immediately connect with. So, things that it might not be the best literature, but it's the ones that I kind of had a lot of, personal response to. So, So my top, in no particular order, I should say as well. My top one is the Lock and Key box set. So that's the Joe Hill and Gabriel Rodriguez.
Yeah, I've heard very good
comic book. It's.
I have had that sitting on my desk for about a year now. Now you finally give me a reason to read it.
Oh, you've got to read it. It's genuinely. I mean, it's beautiful. It's very moving. It's really exciting. It's sort of like the Goonies meets a kind of, I guess, like a one of the lighter Stephen King stories, and then it's got a bit of sort of that New England Gothic. Adventuring kind of a group of kids have to solve a mystery. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. I loved it. I thought it was it's one of the best comic books that I've ever read by far.
Well, he's Stephen King's son, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So he's and it's. I mean, I don't necessarily know if that stuff is genetic, but if it is, they are the best scientific explanation for it, because he basically does that Stephen King thing, which is so enjoyable. But does it in a very slightly different way. But that's Lock and Key. The box set is definitely in the top one. And then the second one is Fantasy Freaks and Gaming Geeks.
Ooh, that sounds great.
So to give it its full title, it's an epic quest for reality among role players, online gamers, and other dwellers of imaginary realms.
Nice.
That's by Ethan Gilsdorf. It might be Gilsdorf, but I think it's Ethan.
And what was it called again? Fantasy Freaks.
Fantasy Freaks and Gaming Geeks, and that's basically Ethan traveling around meeting people who are LARPers or online gamers, and kind of hearing their story. Really, it's about it's sort of like a documentary in text form. It's about him meeting people who have these online personas, and they're finding out the real person behind it. And if you liked any documentaries such as The Dungeon Masters, which was a couple of years ago, or I think there's one called LARPers from about 5 years ago. They're all on Netflix actually. But if you like anything like that, it's great. It scratches that itch, and I'm a big fan of that kind of stuff.
Cool.
And then my third one is Station 11 by Emily.
that was on my list too.
Oh, no way. Oh, great. Yes.
I literally have a copy of Station 11. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
Right next to me.
Amazing. Oh, good,
man.
Good.
Shall I read out the blurb?
You please do.
Please,
that's
read out the blurb.
It's a fantastic book.
Yeah, thoroughly recommended. What was lost in the collapse? Almost everything, almost everyone, but there is still such beauty. One snowy night in Toronto, famous actor Arthur Leander dies on stage whilst performing the role of a lifetime. That same evening, a deadly virus touches down in North America. The world will never be the same again. 20 years later, Kirsten, an actress in the Travelling Symphony, performs Shakespeare in the settlements that have grown up since the collapse. But then her newly hopeful world is threatened. If civilization was lost, what would you preserve, and how far would you go to protect it?
Yeah.
So that blurb is okay. Like, it was enough to get me to read the book. I will say one thing about the book is, like, the theater. It's all about the theater. It's literally about a theater troupe traveling from station to station and performing Shakespeare. It's about the art. It's very much about one actor in particular, who's this kind of Richard Burton-esque character, had many lovers, many wives, but was just a brilliant actor, and kind of the influence he had even in the present day, and how that torch was kind of kept alive even after this kind of disaster happens on Earth. So it's very much about theater as much as it's about all the other usual post-apocalyptic stuff.
That's absolutely right. You're absolutely right. That is genuinely the heart of it and the focus of it. And a lot of reviews that were about it was said that it's about our life now, but as seen from someone who doesn't have that anymore because it's 25 years in the future.
Yeah, and that's a really poignant and recurring theme throughout the book, isn't it? It's very much that it's almost like a nostalgia for a world that you didn't actually exist in.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the main character, without ruining anything, there are pieces of iconography, right, that the character keeps coming across, and she has a particular relationship to it. We can't really say any more without spoiling it, but it's a really wonderful and kind of subtly done link to that previous life and that previous world, and it's really original in the way that it handles that.
Yeah.
One of those recurring motifs that I really love is the one they actually borrow from Star Trek Voyager, right?
Oh yeah.
The idea of survival is insufficient.
It's insufficient.
It was just a very beautiful, taking a geeky thing that we all love and actually finding some meaning out of it. I actually had a similar experience last year. I mentioned earlier I was a huge Angel fan.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great quote that kind of becomes a driving motif of the show. It's this idea that Angel for a long time is driven by this idea of destiny, and then he kind of realizes at one point he actually has no destiny. Whatever destiny he has is what he makes at this moment. So kind of his driving mantra becomes this idea of, he literally says, nothing we do matters, all that matters is what we do, which is, like, I think it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. And then in Russia, last year, there were a bunch of lesbian activists protesting against the crackdown against homosexuals, and some of these activists, they actually said they were inspired by that quote, and they actually said that on The Daily Show, like that was their driving mantra for protesting Vladimir Putin, and I was like, that's so cool.
That's great. There's a great article in there,
really
how
cool.
how Buffy, how the link between Buffy and Pussy Riot. from slaying vampires to slaying the anti-homosexuality regime.
So the cure for Vladimir Putin is a lot of sci-fi, right?
Definitely. I think a lot of sci-fi pretty much solves everything. Just as a very interesting link, well, I think it's interesting. I'll just make it quick. That, what I love about how subtly that quote is used. Well, I love that the quote is used very subtly. Something in a book called Ready Player One.
Oh yeah.
His author Ernest Cline is just about to follow up with Armada. This is the kind of one of the current quintessential literary books. Is fiction very much about games. Has come under flack for, particularly by a writer called Laura Hudson, writing for Slate, and I absolutely love this review. It's like a real hatchet job. It's basically that he just comes across as just. The whole book is basically just an in-joke for people who grew up in the 80s playing certain kind of games, and just a complete, checkbox. He kind of sees himself as like this geek sage, but and I think it's a real problem. And I haven't read Armada, but I really recommend reading The Hatchet Job. And the headline, the leader is Ernest Cline's Armada is everything wrong with gaming culture wrapped up in one soon-to-be best-selling novel. So she even recognizes in the title, like we were saying earlier, it's probably going to be hugely successful. Ready Player One, Steven Spielberg's making a film adaptation of.
Danny, I'm going to interrupt you because that makes me want to do a follow-up episode. Like, I was like, we could talk about this now, but I think it's going to be a whole episode on representation of geeks in fiction, especially in novels. I think that's so interesting. You're just saying about Armada,
yeah.
That is going to be your bumper episode because there is a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
In that situation.
A hell of a lot of terrible,
really bad,
terrible representation.
I'm just going to put Nightmare on Elm Street 3 out there, where they play Dungeons and Dragons, and in fact, one of the nightmares is about Dungeons and Dragons. You have to watch that. It's genuinely the worst example I've ever seen of. That's my recommendation.
Yashoda, what about your top tips?
Station 11 was absolutely one of them. So, in the interest of
sorry about that.
That's all right. One book I love, and have reread. I'm actually going to mention a nonfiction book, just for variety. It's called The Age of Wonder.
Oh, yeah.
The subtitle is How the Romantic Generation Discovered the Beauty and Terror of Science. It's fantastic. It's all about how poets and artists actually were as involved in science as actual scientists in the 18th and 19th centuries. And it's just fascinating, the links between the two. There's German scientists they talk about in Tahiti, they talk about all over the world. It's just a great book, and it's just something, like, if you love science and if you love science fiction, I cannot recommend it enough. I have recommended it to loads of people, and every one of them has loved it. So
The Age of Wonder.
The Age of Wonder, yeah.
Cool.
So that's one. What else? So I have a personal favorite that I don't know It's for everyone. It's me and my high school best friends. We're absolutely obsessed with this series. The author her name is Juliette Marillier. She's from New Zealand. And the series is called Seven Waters. It's now become a 7-novel crazy thing, but I still refer to it as a trilogy because it was a trilogy. And then she went back and did a whole bunch of other work, and then she returned to Seven Waters many years later. And it was really interesting when we're talking about Go Set a Watchman. Is Marillier actually writes in the intro for the 4th book when she comes back to it. She's like, it's been 10 years since I've been in this world. My writing has evolved. My approach to characterization has evolved.
That's interesting.
So while this is technically still set in that world and has descendants of some of those characters, she's like up front, she's like, this is not going to be the same. Do not expect this to be the same. And it wasn't. It wasn't the same. I did not love it the way I loved the original novels, but I did appreciate that kind of upfront honesty of like, hey, I've been doing a lot of different things since then, and I have become a different artist now. So
that's cool, and I think as an author, you're entitled to that.
Yeah.
I think again, fans, whether it's in any medium, they become very entitled to that style that they know and love, right?
Right.
And in like the Dark Tower series of Stephen King, or this one you're talking about, Seven Waters. It can be quite a shock for that style to change over time, but I think you're definitely entitled to, as a creator. You can't stagnate. You got to keep kind of changing your style.
You gotta keep going. Yeah, and you gotta understand what your fans are looking for, and she knows what her fans were looking for, and she was upfront with them, so that's fine. I have 2 more, if I'm not being greedy.
Not at all. Go on. Let's hear them.
One I think hardly anyone has read, so I've got to put a plug in for it. It's called We. And the author is Yevgeny Zamyatin. It was written before 1984, and it was written before Brave New World, and is the first of that kind of human culture in the future dystopia type novels. It's Russian. It was recently retranslated. That's when I came across it. And it's fantastic. The ideas in it feel so fresh, because even when you read 1984 now, it doesn't feel fresh. Like, it seeped so far into pop culture.
Yeah.
A lot of these ideas just don't seem original, even though it is the original of many of those ideas.
Yeah.
But yeah, I highly recommend We. Another personal favorite, which you have to read if you haven't, but I can't imagine you guys haven't read it, is The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood.
Oh yeah.
That is the gateway. That is the gateway book. When people say they don't like sci-fi, I'm like, how do you feel about The Handmaid's Tale? They're like, oh, it's fantastic, and I'm like, how? That is pure sci-fi, guys.
Yeah.
It really is. She struggled with that a lot, actually, isn't she, Margaret Atwood? She always strikes me as someone who's so, like, she just doesn't care really where it is, but I think the market has always been, don't know whether to put her in the sci-fi category or the literature category. And obviously she's done, like, Surfacing, the other book, another book she's done, that is pure literature. That's kind of absolutely straightforward, but the rest, absolutely, the sci-fi.
I mean, things like Oryx and Crake are... Yeah. I mean, Handmaid's Tale, you could argue, like, there's not a lot of science in it. It's more conceptual. But Oryx and Crake is about science in the future.
Yeah. Oryx and Crake is great, actually.
Yeah, she's fantastic, I've got to say. And her on Twitter as well is like... Sorry, can you hear an alarm? I apologise.
That's all right. We'll let it go past.
Hang on, let's just get a good listen, then I can edit in some funny moments. Everyone be quiet for a sec. Okay, cool.
There you go. That's my living arrangements at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sorry, Esther. Sorry, you were.
That's all right. You were talking about Margaret Atwood's Twitter.
Yeah, she's incredible. The stuff that she was the first person to use that signing a book. I can't remember what the name of the project was that she did, but it was to sign a book from in Canada, but it was a robot pen that signed a book in England. She mirrored her writing.
Amazing.
It was fantastic. It was really, really cool.
That's awesome, and very lazy, but also technologically sound.
She's great. I mean, she's one of those authors, and actually, I don't know if you know any other, Rob. She's one of the few who's not afraid of technology. She was one of the first adopters of Twitter, like, period. Not even in the literary category. She was one of the first celebrities to actually kind of get on it and use it and talk to people, and she's shown that with all kinds of other new technologies.
Brilliant.
I can't really think of anyone else off the top of my head who's been that open to new media channels.
There's not. No, there's generally not. I mean, the only person I can think straight away is Stephen Fry. I mean, that's the only guy that I can think that that has adopted it in the same way. I mean, our authors are on social media, you know, from marketing reasons a lot of the time, but also they want to, you know, talk to fans and that kind of thing. But there's no one who's embraced it in that way that she has or Stephen Fry has at all.
There's one author I've been following recently because I just read his book, City of Stairs, which is an awesome book, by the way. I don't know if you guys have read it.
Who's the author?
His name is Robert Jackson Bennett. It actually just got nominated for World Fantasy Award or something. That cool. World Fantasy Award list this year is fantastic. But the thing that's great about this book is, like, not only is it interesting sci-fi fantasy, but it actually has queer characters and female characters, which is sort of a persistent irritation of mine in the genre, in that not very diverse.
No, fair enough. This there's a book that's coming out, The Traitor. In America, it's called The Traitor Baru Coromon by Seth Dickinson. The main character, whose name I completely forget, is she's gay, and the book is about that her homeworld is completely like LGBT. You know, it's all incorporated as part of the world. There's no such thing as gay marriage. It's just marriage. Everyone can do what they want. And then the Empire comes in and destroys it.
Oh my god!
The connotations there are clear to see. Yeah. But they come and try and stop that happening, and she has to go on a mission basically to defeat the Empire, which is
that's cool.
But it's rare to have that. It's the LGBT considerations in genre particularly is rare to see.
And it's cool that it sounds like in that book that's like the main motivation.
That's her,
not like a side thought. It's like that's kind of her whole history, her whole origin story.
That's right.
That's like why she's going to war. I like that. That sounds really cool.
That sounds awesome. What was it called again? I missed the title.
It's The Traitor Baru Coromon.
Okay.
And she, I think she has two fathers in it, and one of them is the Empire capture him, if I remember correctly, or kill him. But it's not a spoiler. That's basically the kind of the kick-off of the plot, right. and it's her kind of
cool.
mission.
Okay. Oh, we've got some great recommendations coming fast.
I love this book. This book cover. This book cover is kick-ass. Yeah.
Yeah. With the is that the American one or the?
Yeah, I'm looking at the American one.
Yeah, they've got to say, and the English one is beautiful as well. They've got it absolutely pitch perfect with it, and I think we've got high hopes for it. I think it's going to be good. It's going to be good.
Well, I'm going to read it. I'm excited.
Oh, great! Oh, well, I'll send you a copy happily.
Oh, brilliant! I'd love to read it.
Yeah, no worries. You'll enjoy it.
And you can't say that, or everyone will want one.
I don't. Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah, sorry.
I think I lost you guys for a second there. But I kind of picked up the thread. But what I started to say, I don't know if anybody heard, was Yashoda, did you have another one?
I've got so many other ones.
We don't have to go through all of them.
I know. What else have I read recently that I really enjoyed? Can I cheat and give a movie?
Yeah, for sure. Oh no, okay. Oh.
God damn it.
No, go on.
Only because I cannot stress how amazing it is Ex Machina.
Oh my god, yeah. Wasn't it? Oh.
That is my dream science fiction movie. Oscar Isaac is pure perfection. It's got interesting science fictional ideas. It's got funny jokes about social media companies today. It's just fantastic, and it's got, I mean, because this is a pretty well-trodden genre, right? The idea of artificial intelligence and how to get them closer to humanity. But this movie genuinely did something interesting with it, kind of developing the Voight-Kampff test per se, and also just the way the characters evolve through the story. It's very much like a locked room story almost, and the way they break out of this locked room is just fascinating to me.
It's I haven't seen it, but I've just checked my Wonder list, and it is literally top of my list. So yeah, I really need to check it out. I've only heard brilliant things about it, and of course it's directed by Alex Garland.
Yes.
I love for writing a bunch of video games.
28 Days Later.
28 Days Later, he did Enslaved, Odyssey to the West, which is an amazing game. So I love Alex Garland.
Sorry, Danny, I am going to cut in and we can edit out something later, but the book I was on the tip of my tongue and I could not remember that is fantastic and everyone should read is Octavia Butler.
Butler.
I would say read anything by Octavia Butler. She's fantastic. One of the very few African-American female authors who became a very, very successful science fiction writer. She's going through a bit of a rediscovery right now. She also writes a lot about sexuality, homosexuality, and also just how sexuality evolves in the future. She's very concerned with reflecting the present in the future. But the book, oh God, what's it called? I'm literally looking up right now. It's a series. It's the Patternist series. So the first book in that series called, I think it's Wild Seed. Yeah, it's Wild Seed. So the whole idea is that slavery was started by this group of African gods.
Okay, that sounds like an unusual way around of doing it.
It's if you read it, it is fearless. It's like nothing I've ever read. It's so controversial. There's actually a great Orson Scott Card review that I found of the book after I read the book. The review is from 1990, and I was really interested to find out that apparently Orson Scott Card was not always a douchebag. He actually
gets a lot of bad rep.
Yeah,
he's said some sensible things in the past.
Yeah, maybe I'll share that link with you, and we can post it on the blog.
We'll definitely
his
put it on the
review.
blog.
But I highly recommend it. It's these immortal gods in Africa and how they're perpetuating their heritage and their future through the use of slavery and how that evolves. Oh, it's fantastic.
That sounds great.
Really cool.
Yeah, that's on the list for sure. That sounds brilliant.
Well,
how are you, Danny? What's your top tips?
Yeah, it's your turn, man.
Okay. Most of mine, like, I've written a couple down, thinking about them, are kind of tangentially or like loosely sci-fi, but they definitely operate on those kind of planes, alternate universe. So, top of my list is probably the Glass Bead Game by Herman Hesse.
Ooh, interesting.
I don't know if either of you guys have read it.
No,
I have not read that. I've only read Siddhartha, like every good hippie.
Check out the Glass Bead Game. It's one of, if not my favorite book ever, and it's hard to tell like exactly where and when all the action is set. They never really say, but once you kind of get fairly deep into it, you realize that it's probably somewhat in the future in this very kind of like pacifist, isolationist, mountaintop kind of community. And it's basically just completely devoted to this it's like absolute apex of culture, this game called the Glass Bead Game. And you never really get a sense of like the rules or how it's played, because they kind of say that it encapsulates every aspect of like culture and science, and these games like take place over weeks and weeks. And so it's very satirical about that kind of like over reliance on like culture and over kind of glorification of it. But it is also, it's like, it feels a bit fantasy in a way, but I think it's actually set in the future in this like incredibly ascetic, overly philosophical community, and it's just, I love it. Bit more straightforward, sci-fi's Hyperion by Dan Simmons.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've read his horror stuff actually. I haven't read his sci-fi stuff.
I've never read.
That's another book I've got sitting on my desk, and I have not read it yet.
You've got to get stuck in. It's absolute. It's what I call kitchen sink sci-fi. It's like from one page to the other, you'll like in one sentence there'll be like a flying tree spaceship, and then like this crazy intergalactic war, and then this like alternate breed of humans. It's just, but somehow it all hangs together, and again without spoiling pretty much what the whole book is about. It's kind of told as 6 separate stories. So there are 6 characters gathered around gathering together. They're all going on this pilgrimage to find something called a Shrike, which I don't want to spoil because like the way it kind of comes out in a book, what it really is amazing. And then they're each nearly at their destination, and they're kind of relating to each other how they got there and their personal stories. So.
Oh, that sounds fantastic.
Sounds really good. Yeah.
It also sounds like the stuff the rabid puppies fantasize about. No offense to this book. Like, I know I've heard wonderful things about Hyperion, but just knowing the rabid puppies are like, what happened to the good old days of sci-fi with like moving ships and apparently kitchen sinks?
Yeah. Very futuristic, very sleek kitchen sinks.
Sleek kitchen sinks.
Yeah.
There's our next website.
That's three. That's three in one podcast. I'm
absolutely knocking them out. I'm going to whiz through the other three because we're kind of starting to run short on time. Infinite Jest, which we mentioned before, and which again, is technically sci-fi. I love the idea, just the complete piss-take satirical setting where we've gone so far into branding and advertising that we live in the year of subsidized time. So every year is sponsored. And
the jokes about the video phone are great.
Yeah, exactly. It's very weirdly retro-futurist, isn't it? Because it's like, it is sci-fi and it's almost post-apocalyptic in a way, but then everyone is after this videotape and all mucking around playing tennis. Saturn's Children by Charles Stross.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, again, just it's wonderfully written. I think it's a really interesting premise. It's basically about a sex Borg that gets activated. It's kind of like a defunct line. So her whole line of androids was made. She's a robotic courtesan designed to please children. Children? That's weird. Humans. But she got activated like a century after humans died out. So the universe is run by a kind of feudal caste system of androids, and she's just completely out of place, out of time, has all these like inbuilt human-esque sex drives, but no humans. So it's very much about destiny and impulse and like what's your place in the universe. But it's also just like a real romp. She just romps around, and I don't mean sexually. I mean again, like a bit of a cool space opera.
Right.
And I'll cap it off with the Tale of the Eternal Champion series by Michael Moorcock, which is probably the only series I've ever read which literally goes through fantasy, high sci-fi, modern day, and magical realism all at once.
That is
awesome.
Of what I've read of Michael Moorcock, that sounds absolutely spot on. He's his mother London, isn't it? The his kind of psychogeographic stuff that he does, and
exactly.
It's bananas, but brilliant.
And also, it just gets even better. I mean, he's an incredibly gifted writer, and then you realise that he was also in Hawkwind.
No, what? No way.
It's Hawkwind. There was like the sci-fi rock band, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Hawkwind. Yeah, he was. I think he was the drummer in Hawkwind. Yeah, space rock. Let me just quickly.
That's brilliant.
Also known as Sonic Assassins, Hawk Lords, Agents of Chaos. Yeah, he was in Hawkwind, which just makes it even better.
That's really good.
So I think a good jumping in point, because there are a hell of a lot of books if anybody's interested, is I think the first one is called Von Beck. The second one also is called Tale of the Eternal Champion, and features one of his aliases called Eric Koza. So yeah, but basically just jump in because they're all kind of loosely connected, but non-linear. So
that's fantastic.
Cool. Great. Okay, so we're kind of due to wrap up, but there is a question, Rob, that has been put to you by our past guest, Daniela, which was, if we remember correctly, what advice would you give to your younger self?
That's a good one. Gosh, there's a lot of answers to that. I'm going to go for career advice, I think, because that is always important to everyone.
Yeah.
I would say oh gosh, I don't know. It's so hard.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I guess we would all say to our younger selves, but
yeah, I'm in a difficult situation because career-wise, I'm leaving because I want a bit of space to travel and all that kind of thing, but also financially, it's a little difficult in publishing to to feel like you're progressing at the level that you would hope to progress, which is terrible, and I shouldn't necessarily feel like that. But you know, it's important to me, particularly living in London, that you know that I feel like I'm kind of earning to the level that I'm working to. So maybe I would say to my younger self, do you know what I'd say? I'd say work before you decide what you're going to do at university. And actually, I'd give that advice to every single young person. I'd say work a little bit before you decide. Maybe wait till you're 20, 21, and then decide what you want to do. I've met a couple of people recently who are doing courses later in their life, and they're saying, "It's fantastic. I've got experience. I know exactly what I want to study. The money that now I have to spend, particularly with the new Conservative changes in the grant system, means that you know they can have a think about what they want to do." So I would definitely say to my younger self, continue, have a lot of fun that you did, but perhaps work for a little while and then decide what you want to do.
I think that's.
Would you agree with that? Would you say that to your younger self?
I completely agree. I mean, you know, back in the 80s when you got paid to go to uni, I don't think it would have applied, but for our generation and the next ones, I think for what you pay, I mean, I would even often say to people, you know, don't bother going to university if you're not sure.
Well, you know,
it's not something very vocational. It's such a gamble now.
Absolutely, it really. I'm still paying off my loan. I'll probably be paying it off for the next 10 years at least. I'm 30 now, so it's. I know it's kind of it's a scary situation, I think, to be in. You don't think of it a month on month, but actually when you get to the month on month level, you think, wow, that is a lot of money to be going out. To be paying something that I don't even use anymore. I don't have to say that I have a degree particularly. That's not what is important to employers now. So sorry, that's so depressing advice, isn't it?
That is don't do it. Valuable life advice.
That's good.
So what question are you going to ask of our next guest?
Now, mine's going to be literature based, of course it has to be.
Brilliant.
Of course.
Sadly enough. But and I'm stealing a little bit from one of my favourite radio shows, but I'm going to ask, on your desert island, what's your book of choice?
I
think
cool.
it's good.
That's a great question. Mine would be Infinite Jest. I already know that.
Brilliant.
Desert Island
great.
book.
That's brilliant. Oh, incidentally, you guys looking forward to the new film, the new David Foster Wallace? Well,
I have such mixed feelings about that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, same.
Do you? What is it? The Jason Segel or just the general kind of?
Just the whole thing. I mean, I think Jason Segel looks the part.
He is good.
From the trailer, they both seem to fit the part really well. I just have a certain discomfort, and this is already happening. People who do not know David Foster Wallace or know very little about him, they're getting a picture of him from this movie that I think is weird and difficult to understand without actually knowing any of his work. Even if it's not Infinite Jest, like if you've even read some of his nonfiction, you get a flavor for who he is. So I'm worried. I'm a little worried about that.
The main issue for me is, I mean, the guy was a severe depressive. Right. He was a deeply unhappy man. I mean, obviously, again, for anybody that doesn't know, he killed himself. I think, did he hang himself?
Yeah. He did,
like really young, and I mean, he was a severe depressive, and I just worry with these kind of films. First of all, are they just going to put a gloss on that? Because in these kind of like Hollywood biopics, you know, how far down that kind of very realistic but dark route are they really going to go? Representation of depression is always glossed over and fudged in Hollywood, and I'm worried about that for two reasons. Number one, because I think it's unfaithful to the character, to the real man. You know, that kind of cynicism was a big part of his writing, but also it's just another opportunity to really engage with an important topic. For a lot of people that do have depression or struggle with it, they could do some positive role models depicted, you know, on screen. Let them know that it's okay, that it happens. It's not to be shied away from. And I think if for anybody that is maybe aware that he was that and then see it like glossed over, it's just another disavowal, just another don't really talk about it. So, but you know, who knows? Fingers crossed.
I know what you mean, Manny. Just based on the trailer, it looks like a Bon Mot film where they just look at the greatest hits bits, and you think, well, that's not the human being. And actually, the more interesting film would be to see what he was actually like. But then obviously they've got the consideration that they can't say that it's him and all that kind of. Because I don't think are they calling him David Foster Wallace in the film, or does he ever? Maybe it is. They are calling him that, but I suppose that it has to be that kind of. It is that greatest hits sort of thing, which in his case doesn't really seem right.
It doesn't
sit
right,
does
does
it?
it?
You've said it doesn't sit right.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Oh well, I'll probably still try and see it.
Yeah, maybe a VOD.
Because he's a like actor, but anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we're probably coming up to the pretty much the end of our allotted time.
Great.
So we have a ton of amazing book recommendations.
Yeah.
We've got some golden life advice. We've solved the question of internet outrage. I'd say it's been very productive. So,
so we've done well for an hour or so.
We've also got the three next podcast names or brilliant website titles out of it.
Guys, we should go in business. We should just name URLs. We could do that. That'd be fun.
Absolutely.
Oh my god.
Dream job.
That'd be awesome. That's the next career, right?
Definitely. Well, Rob, thank you so much for joining us. It really has been a pleasure. And hopefully, when you get back from traveling, when do you get back?
Probably be November or December time, I think.
Great. Well, I think that will be plenty of time to warrant having you back on.
I'd love
when
to.
you get back from
I
traveling.
totally agree.
Yeah, and you can tell us some stories.
I hope so. Yeah. Thank you. It's been fantastic. It's been really good fun. Thanks a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. It was a great conversation, and there's actually about 10 new branches of conversation I'd love to have with you next time. So.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Look forward to it. Cool. Well, thank you again, Rob. You showed up as always, and to everybody listening, thanks for your time. Let us know what you think over Twitter at UncaringUnicast. And Rob, what's your Twitter?
At RobCox85. I've got one of those, I'm afraid. One of my birthday ones.
That's okay. Child of 85. It makes sense. So, yeah, get in touch, everybody. Thank you once again, and we'll see you in a fortnight. Happy reading.